Good evening, I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Thursday, August 4th. We begin our cast with Canada's latest moves to aid in the war in Ukraine. Canada is sending military trainers to the United Kingdom to help teach Ukrainians how to fight Russian forces. Defense Minister Anita Anand announced today that up to 225 members of the Canadian Armed Forces will go to the UK for 4 months. There, they'll work with counterparts from the UK, the Netherlands, and New Zealand in training Ukrainian troops on the basics of soldiering. Ukraine reported in June that 10,000 of its soldiers had been killed since Russian forces invaded in February, with thousands more wounded and missing. All right, well, meanwhile, the fallout at Hockey Canada continues. Former Supreme Court of Canada Judge Thomas Cromwell is leading an independent review of Hockey Canada's governance that begins immediately. There have been calls for a change of leadership at Hockey Canada, this for the way it handled recent sexual assault allegations against players. Members of the 2003 and 2018 World Junior team have been accused of separate incidents of group sexual assault. It was also revealed that the organization maintained a fund for uninsured payments that was funded by player fees, and it included settlements of sexual assault complaints. The independent review is expected to provide recommendations before Hockey Canada's general meeting in November. Canada is being encouraged to secure a free trade agreement with India. The idea comes from a new joint report from the Business Council of Canada and the Canada-India Business Council, which calls India one of Canada's largest untapped trade opportunities and compares its economy to China's 2 decades ago. Canada began negotiations with India in 2010, but India has demonstrated some reluctance to engage in a pact. However, trade negotiations were revived when International Trade Minister Mary Ng visited India in March. Turning to the federal Conservative leadership race, which held its final debate yesterday, all 3 men who showed up at the final debate agreed that uniting the party will be a key priority. Jean Charest, Scott Aitchison, and Roman Baber said unity will be crucial if the Tories are going to have a fighting chance at defeating the Liberal government in the next election. Other topics at the Ottawa debate included climate change, affordability, fixing travel in Canada, and advancing reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. 2 other leadership contenders, Pierre Poilievre and Leslyn Lewis, did not show up at the debate. On the East Coast, the government of Newfoundland and Labrador says Quebec is sending assistance to battle forest fires raging on the island portion of the province. Quebec is sending 7 crew members and 3 aircraft, including 2 water bombers, to central Newfoundland for a 5 to 7 day period. Fisheries, Forestry, and Agricultural Minister Derek Bragg says hotter than usual temperatures have led to more wildfires at greater sizes this year than usual. Experts are touting a recent move by a Toronto university as a way to increase COVID-19 vaccine uptake. Last week, the University of Toronto announced that it would require those in residence to have at least 3 shots of the COVID-19 vaccine. But the head of Ontario's COVID Science Advisory Table says a significant increase in uptake would only be possible if other schools followed suit. 3rd dose uptake in the 18 to 29 age group is the lowest of any eligible adult cohort nationally. On the West Coast, BC's Ministry of Health says only a fraction of parents in the province have so far registered their infants and preschoolers to get vaccinated. Officials estimate around 208,000 kids between 6 months and 5 years old are eligible to receive the COVID-19 shot. Online registration became available on July 14th, but as of Wednesday, just over 13,600 of those kids had been registered by a parent. The Manitoba government will not be appealing a court ruling over hundreds of millions of dollars in child benefit payments. A Court of Queen's Bench justice ruled in May that the province violated the rights of Indigenous children in care. This by clawing back federal payments called the Children's Special Allowance from 2006 to 2019. Indigenous leaders say the province kept more than $300 million over 13 years. The government has not said whether it will repay the money. A woman who went missing with her son last month in Saskatchewan is one of 3 people nominated for the Stephen Leacock Memorial Medal for Humor. Dawn Dumont Walker, whose book was published under the name Dawn Dumont, was last seen in Saskatoon on July 22nd. She was with her 7-year-old son, Vincent. Saskatoon Police and RCMP are still investigating. All right, stay tuned. We'll be right back. Up next, we'll be speaking with Brendan Caldwell of Caldwell Securities Ltd. to find out the best ways to de-stress amid financial strain. So stay tuned. Forum Daily will be right back after a short break. Canadians continue to deal with rising prices, interest rates, and a volatile stock market. Now, that's a lot to handle. And amid all this, parents are showing concern about opportunities for their children and a stable financial future for their families. Inflation hit a 39-year high in June. This comes amid an economy hampered by COVID-19, labor shortages, and supply chain challenges. So what can Canadians do to deal with the stress associated with all of this? Joining us now to tell us how he handles the stress is Brendan Caldwell, Director of Caldwell Securities Ltd. Brendan, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Well, thank you, Nima, but now you got me totally stressed out. I don't know what to say.
Well, Brendan, let's talk about this month in particular. August is typically the time that families take time off before the school year begins. And you believe that this year especially, it's extremely important to take whatever time that you have to de-stress. Why is that?
Well, I would agree, because, this has been a long and difficult road for everybody, and some far more difficult than others. We've had loss of time, loss in some cases loved ones. And I think it is important for each of us to do what is necessary to actually take a little time, focus on ourselves, and get our whole selves straight, heart, mind, and body.
Definitely very important, Brendan. Now, you yourself have a lot on your plate, from a volatile stock market to potentially concerned clients regarding the stock market. So that's a lot to take for yourself. What do you do to de-stress, to keep your mental health in check?
Well, the funny thing is, most people think the ups and downs of the stock market are the most stressful parts of our industry. It's not. The market goes up, the market goes down. The general trend in the Western world has it's been to go up with some dips along the way, but that's not actually the stressful part. It's usually dealing with people, their stresses, and their interactions. That tends to be the more challenging part, rather than the financial. There's a few things that I do. I do spend some time in the morning reading, meditating, both helpful literature, the Bible, and I do spend some time sailing, and I got to tell you, I like the movies. I've seen Top Gun 5 times, and if that doesn't help you de-stress, I don't know what will.
Now, on that point of sailing, Brendan, I just learned that you're a sailor and you'd like to introduce other people to the sport. So what kind of feedback have you been getting from people after they first try sailing?
Well, let's clarify, Nima. This wasn't built for a sport, except maybe as a middleweight sumo wrestler. The sailing I do is purely cruising. And what I found is that the crews we take out are mostly people that, at least there'll be somebody on board who hasn't seen Toronto from that perspective. And it's a totally different city when you see it from the water. Or many people have never been sailing before at all. And it's a very different experience. And what works for me about it, and I think others this resonates with, is that unlike a motorboat where you're fighting the wind and the waves, with a sailboat, you're much more in tune to nature. You're actually having to go with and work with nature, the wind and the waves. And that, I find, helps tune up my mind and my spirit.
Sounds like I'm going to have to get into sailing, Brendan. Now, I want to touch on something you said a little earlier in the interview, that we hear a lot of people say that they're stressed, but a lot of times it's a multi-layered issue. It's about maintaining one's overall well-being. That's mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual, but they usually claim that it's all financial stress. What do you think about this, Brendan?
Well, I would quote my father, as I want to do, although he says I never listen to him. I'll quote my father in saying, there are no financial problems. There are financial symptoms of other problems. So if you can spend some time addressing physical, emotional, spiritual, I do think mental, spiritual, emotional, all very much connected. To the extent you can address those needs, those concerns, those deficiencies, the financial tends to be symptomatic of something going wrong elsewhere in one's life. So, there's a lot in your introduction of what to take in terms of what people feel they need to do. And this has been a very challenging, to use your word, environment. But I think if you address the underlying issues with one's own self, it does help considerably the financial and every other external strain.
Some important food for thought there, Brendan. Now, we've got just about 30 seconds left here, but if there was just one piece of advice you could leave our viewers with today, what would it be?
Take it one day at a time. Whether it's financial stress, you're not going to fix all your problems on one day. Emotional or any other stress, we all took however many years or decades we've been on this earth to get to where we are. If you take it one day at a time, you will begin to deal with the issues one after the other. But I've lived on this earth 52 years. All the issues I've built up over a half century aren't going to go away in a week. But if I work on things a little by little, they tend to have a way of getting themselves solved, if only little by little.
Welcome back. Now it's time for Forum Daily's weekly market update with Catherine Murray, host of The Buck Stops Here. Take it away, Catherine.
Thanks, Nima. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your weekly market recap. I'm Catherine Murray. Well, we are seeing markets a little bit mixed this morning, but that follows a very strong rally yesterday, which saw the S&P closing at its highest level since June and the Nasdaq up by about 2.6%, the highest level we've seen since May of this year. The risk-on areas of the market were particularly strong, so think some of the FANG stocks of Facebook, Amazon, and Google. And we also saw some real strength in specialty retail as well as travel, such as airlines, and also media and home builders. Energy stocks, however, yesterday were quite a bit weaker, following the price of crude down, which down by 4%, WTI that is, trading actually below the $90 level. That's the first time we've seen that number since Russia invaded Ukraine. We'll see if that can continue. A lot, of course, to debate as it relates to the outlook for energy and the lack of supply globally. But why the rally that we're seeing? Well, there's a lot of discussion about peak inflation and peak Fed speak. What does that mean? That perhaps we have seen the highest levels of inflation, and therefore the U.S. Federal Reserve will not need to raise rates as fast or as high as previously priced into the market. So again, peak Fed moves. In fact, and interestingly, some market participants are believing that the U.S. Federal Reserve will in fact lower rates in 2023. The Fed has pushed back against that thinking, but nonetheless, that is out there in the market. So that acts as a bit of a tailwind for the broader equity markets and risk-on markets. Now, of course, when we think about what's next and what to watch for, all eyes on the U.S. and Canadian jobs report, which will be out tomorrow morning. That will give us a good read in terms of what the economy really looks like and how much has it in fact slowed down, perhaps because of some of the rate hikes. Also supportive of the market moving higher, the view that perhaps recession fears are in fact overdone. And importantly as well, we are in the midst of second quarter earnings results in the United States as well as Canada. And it seems though the results have come in better than feared. Keep in mind, however, to counter the positive movement in the market, all eyes, of course, from a geopolitical perspective, are on China stepping up military drills in Taiwan, following, of course, Nancy Pelosi's controversial visit to Taiwan. In terms of stock news, as I mentioned, so much focus really just on earnings results and how the stocks act post the results. Restaurant brands, the ticker there is QSR, it's traded in Canada as well as the United States. They, of course, are the owners of Popeyes, Burger King, and Tim Hortons. They did have a revenue and earnings beat. And interestingly as well, the same store sales numbers, so the comps, were actually back to pre-pandemic levels at Tim Hortons. So really a nice recovery there. That stock moving higher today. Alibaba, that stock's up by about 4% on the back of a revenue beat at that company. And I also always like to take a look at some of the chemical companies. Albemarle, for one, the ticker there is ALB. It's in the United States. Chemical companies, to me, give a bit of a read on what's going on in the economy. And they had a very strong beat. And in fact, their pricing going forward is going to be up by about 225% because renegotiated contracts. But their bromine specialties business really drove the upside. That is used in dyestuffs, insecticides, chemicals, as well as pharma. So again, it can be a nice read on the economy. So keep your eyes on that one. And also their lithium EBITDA guidance was also raised quite meaningfully, in fact. So Q2 beat and revenue in line over at Albemarle. We did see Eli Lilly miss on the revenue front. They've got lower realized prices and a little bit of generic competition. Meanwhile, as we look at the TSX, it was up mildly yesterday, not mildly today. It, of course, is weighed down by the price of WTI, much more of a weighting in energy in Canada versus the United States. We're also keeping our eyes on earnings here. Sun Life Financial came in better than expected. Maple Leaf Foods worse than expected, and C&Q in the energy sector better than expected. Housing very much in focus here in Canada. That's after the Toronto and Vancouver real estate boards reported a steep drop in sales and also prices in Toronto, down by about 23-24%. We're keeping our eyes again on jobs reports in Canada. 20,000 is expected, and also for an uptick in unemployment to 5%. There's also the expectation that the Bank of Canada will raise the rates by about 50 basis points when they meet in September 7th to be exact. And lastly, just on the international market front, the Bank of England did raise rates by 50 basis points as expected, the biggest hike since 1995. Nima, I'll leave it there. Back to you.
All right, thanks for that, Catherine. Again, that was Catherine Murray, host of The Buck Stops Here, which airs Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern only on the News Forum Network. Stay with us. When we come back, we've got more news from around the world, from China conducting missile strikes to the outcome of Brittney Griner's trial in Russia. China says it has conducted precision missile strikes in the Strait of Taiwan. This as part of military exercises by its Navy, Air Force, and other departments in 6 zones surrounding the island. The drills were prompted by Tuesday's visit to the island by U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The drills are intended to advertise China's threat to attack the self-governing island republic. This is in response to moves to solidify its de facto independence from Chinese rule. Taiwan has put its military on alert and staged civil defense drills. Meanwhile, a judge in Russia has convicted and sentenced American basketball star Brittney Griner to 9 years in prison for drug possession and smuggling. Judge Anna Sotnikova said the time Ms. Griner has served in custody since her arrest in February would count toward the sentence. Under Russian law, the 31-year-old faced up to 10 years in prison, but judges have considerable latitude on sentencing. Attention now turns to the possibility of the U.S. and Russia agreeing to a high-stakes prisoner swap that would free the 2-time Olympic gold medalist. This comes as Ukrainian officials say a city close to the country's biggest nuclear power plant has sustained a barrage of shelling. The head of the United Nations Nuclear Watchdog Agency warns that the Zaporizhzhia plant is completely out of control. The plant was taken over by Russian troops early in the war. Authorities say several other Ukrainian regions have also been hit with Russian attacks. At least 4 civilians have been killed and 10 more wounded in 24 hours. Some troubling news for the United Kingdom's economy. The Bank of England has projected that it will enter a recession at the end of the year. To tame accelerating inflation driven by the fallout from Russia's war in Ukraine, the bank hiked interest rates today by the largest amount in more than 27 years. It says inflation will accelerate to over 13% in the final 3 months of the year, and it will remain very elevated for much of 2023. Central banks worldwide, including Canada's, are struggling to control surging inflation without tipping economies into recession. Turning to Afghanistan now, where the Taliban is investigating what they describe as claims that al-Qaeda's leader was killed in a U.S. drone strike in Kabul. The group says it has no knowledge of Ayman al-Zawahiri's arrival and residence in the Afghan capital. This counters the claim made by U.S. officials who say the al-Qaeda leader was staying at a safe house linked to the deputy leader of the Taliban, going against the Doha Agreement. In Africa, the regional health body announced some good news in regards to life expectancy on the continent. On Thursday, it said the continent recorded a 10-year increase in its healthy life expectancy from 2000 to 2019. The new report also shows it is the highest growth for any region across the world over the same period. Dr. Lindiwe Makubalo is the Assistant Regional Director for WHO Africa. She says the increase also exceeds the global average, and it is attributable to better essential health services and improvement in health service coverage in reproductive and maternal health and in health services to tackle infectious diseases. But Dr. Makubalo says a lot still needs to be done. This especially with regards to boosting public health financing. This comes as Africa's record is still below the global average of 64 years. Moving to the U.S. now, where the mother of a murdered woman is keeping the memory of her daughter alive by speaking out on behalf of domestic abuse survivors. Gabby Petito was murdered by her boyfriend in the western wilderness while on a cross-country road trip. In the years since then, Nicole Schmidt says many have wondered what can be done to prevent similar tragedies. Ms. Schmidt is now partnering with the U.S. National Domestic Violence Hotline to help others survive turbulent and violent relationships. This through a $100,000 donation from the Gabby Petito Foundation. In Germany, the annual Oktoberfest festival will be back again this fall. The popular beer festival in the Bavarian capital was on a 2-year COVID-19 hiatus. But this year, it will be held without any pandemic restrictions. Oktoberfest has been canceled dozens of times during its more than 200-year history because of wars and pandemics. But this year, revelers can enjoy some 487 beer breweries, restaurants, fish and meat grills, wine vendors, and more. A new video game sensation that features an adventurous feline has resonated with cat lovers, and some of them are using the game to raise money for real cats. The game called Stray from Annapurna Interactive launched in July. Gamers are playing the game live and using online fundraising platforms to benefit cat rescue and adoption organizations. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time on Forum Daily News.